Hey guys, it's Quana and I'm back again with another video. And this is my very first Game of Thrones video, which is ironic because it's also the night of the series finale. But I just wanted to get some thoughts out there that I've been having about the show. I've been a fan for a while, always contemplated doing videos about the show, but just never pulled the trigger. So if you like this video afterwards, please comment down below if you'd like me to break down some more. I'm going to come to this from kind of a couple of different angles, one as a fan and one as an English teacher, and just kind of dismantle a couple of the major gripes that I've been hearing about the show. And while I definitely do have some personal problems with a couple of touches here and there this season, I think the way I approached the season going into it was a way that prepared me to not overhype it. So one, I looked at the fact that they announced it was only going to be 6 episodes from our traditional 10 episodes. It's the last season, and traditionally last seasons aren't the best simply because you're trying to wrap up a storyline. And for many different reasons, you may have not expected it to go on as long as it did. And so maybe you drew certain things out and dragged them out to where now it doesn't really work as well. Or you're trying to rush things up to tie that little bow to get the ending that you wanted. And because of those things, pacing usually is the bigger problem. So I'm going to talk about pacing as the primary problem that people are having this season, and talk about why some of the character development complaints really don't hold water. So if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and let's go ahead and dig on into this. So the first thing I want to talk about a little bit is Daenerys. And I want to start by just reading you guys the poem Fire and Ice by Robert Frost. Some say the world will end in fire. Some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if it had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. I taught this poem to my students about 2 weeks ago, and as I was doing so, had the epiphany of the connection, the greater connection to Game of Thrones, also A Song of Ice and Fire from George R.R. Martin. And so one of the first things that I noted was that as we were discussing this poem in the class, that Robert Frost, in writing the poem, the speaker of the poem, believes that the world would end in fire, although ice is a viable means to end the world, that the speaker believed that it would end in fire. And so he focused with that. He led with that. And in the second half of the poem kind of acknowledges, it's kind of a counter argument to why ice would also be a good mechanism for destroying the world. When George R.R. Martin named his series, he named it A Song of Ice and Fire. So he inverted it. He flipped it. He put ice before the fire. And I don't think that that means in his eyes that ice is the primary way in which the earth ended. I think he was more acknowledging what he was going to tackle first ice, then fire. And of course, we think about the very first scenes of both this series and the novel take place in the north with the White Walkers and the Whites. And we're not going to talk much about the Night King here because, as fans upon fans have mentioned, he is not in the novels as of yet. Doesn't mean he won't be, but he's not as of yet. And so that's more of a serious thing. And while he certainly has a part to play, I think just we can kind of congeal all of these things together to say ice, the Night King, the Whites, the White Walkers, that's ice, and Daenerys and her dragons representing fire. So a lot of people were upset. They felt like the Night King was the bigger battle, although I don't know why. We've seen very little of that in the show. And the biggest and the most controversial elements of the show have come with the battle for the throne. And obviously, the Night King doesn't care about the throne. He wants to destroy mankind. So that just seems like always just a very stupid and naive comment. And I apologize if I'm offending you by saying that, but it was always going to be the bigger conflict coming around this and centering around the throne. So let's go ahead and knock that one out and say definitely was always going to be the Night King's battle first. Then it was going to be the battle for the throne. And in fact, at the end of last season, unless you were under a bridge or you did not watch it, they literally said, let's go ahead and tackle the dead now because they're coming, and then we will help you get your throne. So we can't act surprised. So there's that. So that takes one thing out the list. And the second thing is the character development. Now, there's a video that I watched, and I know memes and people have been like saying these lines on social media that foreshadowing is not character development. And you're right. In fact, what foreshadowing is a literary device that hints at events to come. It keeps the readers guessing. It builds suspense. It is a structural and plot device. So let's just go ahead and say, what is foreshadowing as it pertains to the television series? Well, Bran's vision of a dragon flying over King's Landing, that's foreshadowing. Daenerys' vision from the House of the Undying, where she's in the Red Keep and it's covered with snow, and she's going to touch the throne and she doesn't, and then she hears her babies crying. That is foreshadowing. There are all kinds of other elements of foreshadowing as well, but those are two big ones that I think we can talk about that pertain to what we're seeing currently. But character development is something different. And there are legitimate points that people have been making that others are closing their ears to about why Daenerys has been on this journey and why she always had the potential for this and why this has never been far from her reach. She's always held the potential to be this destructive. So when you think back to the very first season, her journey begins with her as this naive, virginal girl who's in exile, who is being constantly fed by her brother the idea that they're going to reclaim their throne, that they're going to reclaim their family's legacy, that they have a birthright to it. And as she sees her brother have greater and greater weaknesses and not be able to hold his own against what she would deem as lesser men, she begins to see that he is not the person who is worthy enough to take the throne. When we see her brother receive his golden crown from Khal Drogo, and we see her do it so stoically, I think that speaks a lot to her character, because it's not just that her brother was evil and deserved it, but this is the brother who essentially has raised her. She's been with him quite some time. He's the brother, her only family member who's been with her in exile. And so despite his malevolent tendencies toward her, she would still or should still have shown some type of emotional capacity toward his death. And the fact that she didn't shows that she has less capacity toward feeling empathy for those who she deems as weaker or lesser than her. And then we see her on this arc of becoming a sexual being, a Khaleesi, a leader, and constantly back and forth, we see her making these decisions that bring her toward two dynamics, punishment and mercy. Again and again and again throughout all of her storyline, we see these two dynamics, whether she's going to show mercy, whether she's going to deliver punishment and justice, whether she wants someone to bend the knee, or whether she executes them with her dragon. And we see it again and again, and we can't just say that these choices are justifiable because people refuse to bend the knee, because her only claim to power is her birthright. And we see that this has largely been a show that is trying to reject the idea of a birthright as being the reason why you deserve access to the throne. Robert Baratheon himself, who for all intents and purposes was not a horrible leader, he just didn't want to do his job, but he didn't have a claim to the throne when he took it. So we have to dismiss that, and we have to look at these complexities in her personality and say that she's always held the capacity to be destructive. And now that she literally has lost everyone, because at no point in time has she lost everyone. She's always had something, whether it was the hope that she was going to resurrect her husband and then didn't, and then she had her dragons, which she viewed as a type of resurrection. She's always had something, but in her mind she has nothing now, and so she had nothing to lose. So I'm not surprised in the least that she went quote unquote mad queen. I think it's kind of a bit of a falsity that we would even term her as a mad queen, because in her mind her actions had legitimacy. So I think we always saw Daenerys as having the potential to this arc. And if you don't see that, I think that you probably are being blind to her ways, because you were a stan of hers, and she's been kind of set up as being this character that we're supposed to like. And yet, even as early as season 2, guys, she was doing some shady stuff. So, I mean, just go back and look at some of the things again and look to see constantly, not just when she said she was going to take back cities with fire and blood, she was going to burn cities, but she, is capable of great injustice to people and great harm and great pain. She is quite capable of that, despite when people have done her wrong. She, even when people have done her a wrong that did not physically jeopardize her own personal life, she still was willing to take people out. So that leaves me with talking about my theory of what's going to happen tonight. I think what we're going to see is the destruction of the Iron Throne. The title of the first book in the show is Game of Thrones, and yet we've been primarily focused on this one throne. So I think we're going to see the destruction of the Iron Throne. We're going to see a splitting apart of the Seven Kingdoms, because this is where the show has been taking us. The true arc has been this show moving toward this dynamic of the old ways falling apart and the new ways being accepted. The North being able to choose their own leader, first in Robb Stark, then in Jon Snow, and now in a way in Sansa Stark. And we'll see that for the other regions as well. We even saw that with the Iron Islands and with the Greyjoys. The people at first chose Yara. Euron tried to usurp that, and now he's gone. And so they'll get a just queen now, because the queen that they've chosen is back. And so my hope for the show, I like Daenerys. So for her own benefit, in a dream world, she goes back to Essos, where she has been very successful as a ruler. And she goes back there and she rules Meereen, and she takes over the rest of Essos, and she's, the Khaleesi of the sea of grass, and she does all those things. And Jon heads north of the wall and becomes king north of the wall, because that's where his heart is. And that's what I would like to see. But again, I'm not going to fall into the trap. This is Game of Thrones. This is the same show that gave us the death of Ned Stark, the Red Wedding. It gave us Ramsay Bolton and Theon Greyjoy in that whole arc. It gave us Walder Frey and The Pie. This is a show that lives to throw us off balance and do the unexpected, and I expect little else from this show. So any happy endings that we get, I'll consider it a prize. I'm not going to be sad about it, because in the words of Ramsay Bolton, you didn't think this was going to have a happy ending, did it? All right, so those are my thoughts. Let me know down below in the comments what you think. And until next time, guys, toodles!